The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Act of 1965 were a huge turning point in the civil rights movement. Known as some of the most far-reaching civil rights legislations in U.S. history, these laws banned segregation and prerequisites for being allowed to vote. During this time, blacks were seriously oppressed. Everything was segregated. They had different schools, stores, and even water fountains. However, they fought against such segregation. But no matter how hard they fought, they weren't making the huge impact that they wanted to. One of the biggest advocates for black rights was President Lyndon B. Johnson. When the Civil Rights Act, a bill that would ban all segregation, was brought to Congress, Johnson supported it full-heartedly. The Civil Rights Act would ban all segregation based off of race, sex, color, religion, and national origin from schools, restaurants, employments, and all public services like water fountains and bathrooms. Johnson gave numerous speeches to Congress and all around the U.S. to try to get this bill to be ratified.
The issue of equal rights for American Negroes is such an issue. And should we defeat every enemy, and should we double our wealth and conquer the stars, and still be unequal to this issue, then we will have failed as a people and as a nation. For with a country as with a person, what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem.
On June 2nd, 1964, in the presence of many prominent civil rights leaders, President Johnson signed the bill into a law. After the Civil Rights Act was passed, everyone was finally legally equal. At that time, voting was very hard for blacks. There were laws that were specifically in place to stop blacks from voting. An example of such a law is one that mandated people to take literacy tests before voting. Many of the blacks were uneducated or only had basic knowledge due to the segregation of schools and the fact that it was hard for young black children to get a good education. Also, the literacy tests given to blacks and whites were drastically different. Whites would get easy passages like Run Spot Run, while the blacks would get hard passages like Shakespearean plays. This caused the number of blacks that were allowed to vote to be very low, as not many of them could pass tests with such advanced literature. Another common rule was a poll tax. The tax was low enough that most white people could pay it easily, but high enough that most black people couldn't afford it. Members of Congress realized this was a problem specifically after Selma, and decided to try to pass the Voting Act of 1965. This would ban all such rules like literacy tests and poll taxes. Thus, on August 6, 1965, with a vote of 333 to 85, President Johnson signed the Voting Act of 1965. This allowed blacks to finally be able to vote. Just in Mississippi alone, the black turnout went from 5% to 59%. Because of these acts, the United States has finally been able to take huge steps towards ending discrimination. Due to these laws, more people have been able to make a bigger impact on America. The civil rights mandated for everything to be unsegregated. This meant that black and white children were going to school together. This allowed for the children to be exposed to both cultures. They learned more and were more open in the future. This open-mindedness allowed for many movements going on at that time to succeed or make progress. The Voting Act also let for many people to be able to vote. This allowed many of the people who previously didn't have a voice in the government to suddenly have one. This greatly shaped our country's future. Without the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Act of 1965, our country would not have been the way it is today.